everyone. This is Jackie Cooper with the GBA Talk Show, and I would like to welcome today my guest, Paul Dowding. I am really excited to have him back on the GBA Talk Show because of the fact that we had a conversation back in January, and since that time, now it's the end of this year, 2023, going into 2024, there's been a lot that's been going on with his company, TapestryX. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the GBA, it is an association that is definitely dedicated to educating as well as providing service within the blockchain community. And there will be the link below, so that way you can go to gbaglobal.org to look at how you can become a member, and also how you can also participate in the variety of events and conferences that they have throughout the year. I know that I have been involved for over a year now, and every time that I go to an event, I'm learning something new, and I'm meeting individuals within the organization that are thought leaders and also really problem solvers. And that's why I'm really excited to have Paul back on, because when we first spoke, there were a lot of things in development, and now there's a lot of activity and exciting things to share with you. So, Paul, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so you know that my background's education and law, and I'm all about sharing with individuals, developments that happen in this field. And I know that one of the things that we're extremely excited about within the GBA is the blockchain maturity model, because that's something that we both feel, has been needed within our blockchain community to be able to assess what's going on within a company, to see the development that's needed, and to help them with next steps. I know, being an educator, at the moment, I've been doing special ed and general ed. Teachers are always doing professional development. They're always doing reflection on how they can, improve in terms of the teaching side. And I think within the corporate world, that same model also applies, especially when you're in the blockchain area, because again, you might have technical knowledge, you might have business knowledge, but there's always things that can have room for improvement. So before we actually go into the experience that you had with your, blockchain maturity model assessment, which I know that you helped also develop and participate in on many different levels, why don't you go ahead and share for those that might be new to who you are and what you've done in the past and what TapestryX is, so that way they can have a little bit more of a foundation, because you've done a little bit of everything over the years, and you see where the industry, the blockchain community needs to go, and so that's why you've created TapestryX. So why don't you share a little bit more? And for those that are listening on the audio side, definitely hop over to the YouTube side, because we will be showing the link, and we'll also provide the link in the blog below, so that way you can also explore it as well. So Paul, why don't you go ahead and share?
Great. Thank you again. Well, my career, I started my career as actually as a manufacturing engineer. I actually studied aeronautics and astronautics at university and was involved with production engineering, but very quickly made the transition to um, uh, banking operations on a training program. And despite my youthful looks, it was because the world was moving from paper to technology, and operations was seen as, a production-like environment, and they were looking for that kind of experience. And then I was trained, basically in the infrastructure of the industry globally. Luckily, I got involved with what's called global custody, where you have big plan sponsors like pension funds, insurance companies, or mutual funds who invest globally. They'll usually have one custodian capture all their activity despite having multiple fund managers investing on their behalf. So ended up dealing with sort of global infrastructure around the world, got the chance to live and work, originally from the UK, but came to New York, was in Singapore, in Australia, came back to New York, I met my wife, and then that's where I ended up staying. But since then, I got involved with other aspects of the industry, from operations management to product management in securities lending, private wealth, prime brokerage, and then even supporting institutional trading groups. I consulted independently or with other corporations within fund manager back offices, administrators, clearing houses, or depositories. So whether it's from operations management, product, or strategy and innovation, I've always been working with the infrastructure of the industry, and so had some ideas on how to try and make it efficient. And one of the problems with the industry is the technology has been applied according to the silos. So if you've got equity people, they've invented technology for equities. You've got bond people, and there's multiple different types of bonds. They implemented technology for all their bonds. If it's futures, there's options, other derivatives. The technology was built in a siloed way. So consequently, every product has its own unique infrastructure. And really, you're paying a toll when you're investing to have access to all those different infrastructures. I was working on, internalizing transactions and simplifying them, because in some of the larger institutions, you're on both, you're the broker and the custodian. And that led me to find out about blockchain at a convenient time, 2015, just when Ethereum, Auth Recorder, Hyperledger, digital assets were all taking off. And it was supposed to be, this new technology that was going to transform the world. And that's where I looked at it, and I'd see one of the challenges of the industry is that it's dominated by data scientists who are interested in the technicalities of the data and state changes and structures, and product guys who are trying to sell the concept. But what you really need, and this is self-serving, was an operations guy, the guy that was the bookkeeper, the guy that managed the books, because they're the process engineers. They're the people who could look at these things with a critical eye and understand how it could work. So the real potential is obviously it's peer-to-peer settlement, settlement in hours, if not minutes, and a reduction in exceptions and reconciliations. And then the really significant impact of what blockchain has the potential for was to become a universal transaction ledger. Because what I mean by that is, whereas all the products have their own infrastructures, distributed ledger technology or blockchains are effectively a means to make it a common way of recording transactions. So in the same way the internet protocol made communication pervasive. Why? Because if everyone uses the same protocol, you can send an email to whoever you want. You can click a button and we're talking on a video. You're clicking a button and you're watching a recording of this video. So communication became pervasive. Now imagine transactions become uniform and pervasive, because although you have, you can do lots of transactions online today, you're clicking a different app and utilizing multiple infrastructures still. Now imagine it didn't matter where you begin and end, but the transaction could be recorded. That's the huge potential of blockchain. And so was very excited. I'm working for a consultancy and sort of saying, hey guys, this is really amazing. However, with my process engineering hat on, I'm looking at it sort of saying, they're kind of customized. They're struggling with their way they're set up to scale, to handle the capacity. They're basically just doing bilateral transfers, meaning, I have an asset, now you have an asset. There's no accounting, there's no idea of financing transactions, pledging collateral, lending money, having future dated payable receivables. And actually, despite being called distributed ledgers, there's actually no accounting. And then last sort of like thing that's out there is that they're limited interoperability. If, initially they were sort of walled gardens, and you had your assets in your network and that was it. Now they've got some bridging functionality in layer 2 protocols, but it's still pretty clunky as far as, and if you listen to the industry right now, they're kind of worn out on proof of concepts. They want real implementations, and they're doing it where the functionality and performance limitations allow them. Structured products, issuing securities, derivative settlement. Although derivatives are complicated, their settlements are just in payments or payments, with stable coins, other things. So they're relatively simple. The challenge is for the industry to recognize the hurdles. And my interest when I joined the GBA was obviously I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to help out. But part of with us looking at those limitations, TapestryX wasn't an off-the-shelf solution. We designed it to meet the requirements of configurability and flexibility, scalability, high capacity, double entry accounting, future data payable receivables, and interoperability. So that became our guidance, and that's how the design manifests itself. Interesting enough, for what's related to the GBA and what became the blockchain maturity model, in order to help people understand what we had, I'd written sort of design challenges, and then I'd written due diligence questions, sort of asking, does your solution do this? Because if you've got to meet an accounting capability, how can you do that without accounting? How can you? So I was already in that path when I got involved with the GBA, and partly to help, obviously we're promoting TapestryX, but also just what I've learned from it is the participation in the working groups, so I could contribute to the banking and finance working group, which I now lead. But I could also learn, as much as I'm an active voter, I'm not an expert on elections. So the voting working group, the healthcare working group, the other working groups was an interesting source of seeing where other industries, supply chains, a huge one, where blockchain could be applied, and the functionality and performance requirements weren't as demanding as they are in the capital markets.
I want to show what TapestryX looks like. So because you've been so eloquent at describing it. So we're going to hop over to TapestryX, and I'm going to kind of have you give us a tour. For those that are on the audio side, it has a variety of drop downs, and we have the features. Whoops,
Yeah.
daisy.
No, that,
And we also have, it talks about scalability, future data transactions, financial ledger, anonymity, life cycle, security, all the things that you have mentioned. It also talks about use cases and resources and collaborations and about us and contact us. So why don't you talk a little bit more about when someone wants to get involved with Tapestry, what would they do?
well, the easiest way is obviously just to reach out to me on LinkedIn, but on the website, there's actually ways you can contact us to ask for a demo, or even, just look at the videos. We also have a YouTube channel with videos. I'd say in terms of, the key thing is to understand, what is it that's differentiating us in terms of, we're configurable. So we're a no-code solution. We're configurable, so we're life cycle and asset agnostic, asset and transaction life cycle agnostic. We actually have found a way to synchronize the network, the nodes, as by the transaction data alone. So what that means is that the transacting parties can create a transaction, achieve settlement finality, and then then it's synchronized with the network. So we don't need mining consensus algorithms or the cost, risk, and liability of independent validators. That's usually the one that people remembers. But the key ones are actually the configurability, because we can just be configured to do any asset or transaction lifecycle. And then despite the synchronization, we actually have double entry accounting journals. So we're actually posting and reconciling the transactions as they're processing, which means as a ledger, we're actually doing real-time trial balances and balance monitoring. And really, we're pushing the discipline of accounting to the front end. And that's actually the problem with most of the industry in the financial services, is that you'll agree a transaction, and then you'll settle it a day or two later. Then you'll reconcile it the next day or within the week, or then you'll do some accounting at month end and auditing, or further accounting at quarter end, and you're constantly playing catch up. And there's millions of dollars spent on all the exceptions. Although the hit rates, the quality is fairly high, you only need a 1% error rate, and you're dealing in, because millions of transactions then comes down to tens of thousands that have to be chased up. And the problem is you haven't got the discipline. Now, the fact that we can actually agree, record, post, reconcile, and account for every asset in real time, that means you get it right or you don't do it. And so that enforces a discipline, but then it just means that the process is that much more efficient, but you've got something geared to the industry. And if you look at what's happening, the interest in sort of stable coins or even the cryptocurrencies is because they move relatively cheaply and relatively quickly. But the problem is that they're fully paid for. You've got the position to move. The irony of one of the first things I learned in banking was the last thing banks have is any money. Why? Because because if they've got it, they've lent it, you know? So it's this cycle of institutions lending and borrowing to each other. So actually, technically, banks, for all the cash management you do in your own companies, banks are actually technically insolvent because they don't really have much money on hand, which is, it's a strange, weird thing. But when you think about it, it makes sense. But the problem is that on the retail level, payments are relatively small and tend to net each other, so the funding requirements. But when you're dealing with institutions that are moving billions of dollars, the FX market is $5 to $10 trillion a day. So you can't just move that kind of money. You have to know it's going to move, then fund the position. And so there's this constant thing of, moving money, or sorry, funding positions and then recording it. Without accounting, you can't record the funding, but the funding is still done 1 or 2 days later. So, but the idea is that because we can record payable receivables on TapestryX, is that you can record intraday commitments and then choose to net them, finance them intraday. And so we'd actually create where you've got a next day, a repo market that works on a next day basis, or an FX market that normally works on a 2-day basis. You'll actually have these markets working on intraday basis. That provides both efficiencies, lower cost, but also it virtually eliminates, apart from the time difference between netting and financing, eliminates the counterparty risk, which is key. And so the thing is that the crypto stable coins and other things have that kind of right now, but they can only do it to that limited pre-funded amounts. They can't do it on institutional scale. I mean, they can't do it on institutional scale because of the funding, but they also can't do it on institutional scale because they don't have the capacity to scale or the capacity to handle the volumes of transactions. There's 9 million trades a day on the New York Stock Exchange, and you've got to have that capacity in scaling as well as the real-time settlement. And as much as the settlements are fast in some of the solutions, that they tend to be arbitrary because they're dependent on an independent validator selecting your transaction to be validated. They're dependent on a mining process, a bit Bitcoin specific. But even consensus algorithms, you've got to vote on things, you've got to collect them. Is your transaction included? So with arbitrary settlement, there's no certainty intraday, and that disrupts an intraday market. So again, it keeps coming back to the fundamentals of how does the process engineering work, and how do you control it, and most importantly, how do you account for it? Because ultimately, you've got to account for it and reconcile to it.
So let me ask you a question. For the companies that are going to be using your service, what size are they? Are they, can they be small companies? Should they be larger companies? Who are you seeing that will need TapestryX?
Yeah, so what we're targeting right now is most of the networks, like in trading and settlement markets, require some sort of community. You need enough participants to create sort of critical mass or liquidity. But having said that, the larger institutions tend to have internal use cases where they have global entities or branches that transact with each other. There's a lot of internal use cases, and we're targeting that right now because you're dealing with one client who can tell multiple parties who are the nodes in the network. And that's the key. As a blockchain, sometimes a centralized database, in insurance, most insurance companies are controlled by a central authority. They don't need a distributed ledger for all their branches because they've finally got centralized control. But if you're dealing with branches of a regional bank or regional banks transacting with each other, or you're talking about a small industrial company, a mid-sized industrial company with a supply chain where it controls or can have direct the participants, then you've got a network directed by one party that can actually record all the transactions. And part of the flexibility of our interoperability, which is actually, we mirror, although people call stable coins, we really a stable coin mirrors the process of what's called an American depository receipt. If a foreign company wants to issue shares on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, they ask a custodian to escrow their foreign shares, like someone like Mercedes will have their shares escrowed in Germany, and then they'll issue one-to-one US shares that are now on the stock exchange, New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. Well, think about it. That's tokenization. That's taking,
Yeah.
one-to-one relationship.
Yeah.
And you can technically take the US shares and convert them into German shares if you wanted to. An ETF is a share that's issued on a stock exchange based on a backup of assets. So the only difference between a stable coin or a digital dollar or a digital euro is that it's escrowed assets, but they're just transacted on a distributed ledger blockchain, not just a centralized clearinghouse. But
Interesting.
so those concepts kind of existed. The question is that can you do, if you take a normal security, you can lend it, you can finance it, you can do swap derivatives on top of it. Well, unless you've got payable receivables and accounting in your solution, you can't do that. So you're limited to literally fully paid for positions. And while many mutual funds and things are what they call long only, what most people don't know is that in order to increase the returns, they do allow those assets to be lent.
Yes.
So, you know, again, financing and leverage and collateral management and netting of transactions is all critical. And that's just part of the functionality. But let me sort of bring it back. So our clients can be relatively small, mid-sized companies when it comes to supply chain, as long as there's a network that's going to benefit from sharing data or synchronizing data or transacting in real time with records. In supply chain, beyond tracking the goods that are moving through the supply chain, we obviously have the capability of doing the transactions of payments and projecting the invoices ahead. So people tend to process the transactions, issue an invoice, and then they take 1 month to account for it and the next month to fund it. And that's why you don't get paid until, consignment payments in supply chain are minimum 60 days and later. Imagine now you could project all the inventory and assets to the amount that they need to be disclosed. You could ensure payments are going on real time, but we have the mechanics to do those payments. When you get into energy supply chains, you're actually trading the commodities before they move through the pipeline. So the idea that you've actually got executed trades, so we can incorporate that. And then the other thing we try and make people, be creative, is once you're tracking the supply chain, don't limit yourself to the goods. You can track the machines that are in the process. You can track
Exactly.
the
There's a lot of different pieces.
and it's not like you all have to do it day one, but you can suddenly, like I said, how is it that what blockchains and distributed ledgers have done have said, hey, if you can implement this, everything's recorded in the same format, in the same protocol, so that you now have a uniform way of extracting data to any downstream general ledgers or reporting. And as you expand the assets, the reporting still stays the same. The formatting, the APIs are only varying based on new codes, but not a completely different customized smart contract or anything. We're just sort of saying, there's a potential to make it really simple. I think, like with the internet, yeah, it was a simple idea of a URL and a website at first. Then it was email protocol. Then it became video protocol, and then everything. The protocols were expanded, but fundamentally they were using the same principles. They were just expanding the capabilities, and that's the real potential. But that's what led me to working with the GBA and the blockchain maturity model was really that interest. Like I said, we'd done our own due diligence questions, and we're trying to guide people and advise them on, obviously we were trying to say TapestryX is better. What we realized, and I realized with the GBA, is the important thing was to have your blockchain solution meet the requirements of your use case. And that's what I took away from the BMM process was,
So let's talk about the BMM process. I mean, I see the recognition award right behind you,
oh,
which
is that,
yeah, I see
where am
that.
I? Oh, there, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I see that. But I mean, this has been a journey. So, I mean, you and I spoke in January. I mean, we see each other at the various events. You had, your assessment in the spring. I believe you had said it was in
Hmm.
the May time period or thereabouts.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
explain more about the process and what you learned through it. The type of, again, if someone is interested in this, there is information at the gbaglobal.org website that will share
yeah,
how you can register, what kind of things that you need to gather, and the whole
yeah,
process. I know that I went through the 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 assessment modules, and
yeah,
at some point next year, I will sit on one of the panels and observe, and then take the next steps as I learn, because we all need mentors. But
sure.
explain more about what you learned and how did this start?
Yeah, again, uh, there was a standards and certifications working group that was just sort of saying, how do we, how do you assess blockchains? And luckily, Gerard Daché, the founder, has obviously got a background in ISO standards, and Maya Penn, who's part of that group, leads that group, director of that, was an ISO auditor. So they've worked within standards, and there's various people. Obviously, I'm an operations manager, so I've gone through compliance reviews, audit reviews, or in engineering, you go through sort of ISO or Six Sigma type training. So these are sort of things where sort of, the idea was sort of bouncing around. How does this, how can we make an assessment tool? So it actually took about 2 years, believe it or not,
Yeah, you did.
where a few of us would meet on a Saturday morning and try and frame what we thought was the next thing to be considered. And then during the week, there'd be a meeting to sort of hash that out and, refine it or throw it out or put something new in. But it was a combination of, if you had a focus group that could genuinely put something together that was substantive, then the larger group could then pick it apart or validate it or add their 10. You gave them something to critique as opposed to just trying to get a group of 10 to 20 people to come up with ideas and formulate it. It's very hard, but 3 or 4 of you can push an idea, and then the 20 can refine it. So first of all, we had to decide what's going to be assessed. What were the elements of assessment, and then we talk about a maturity model. What were the levels of assessment? And it's not like most people saying, oh, if you've got level 1 through 5, is 1 okay and 5 is brilliant? No, it's actually maturity. So one, again, it took us a while to work out what these levels should be, but 1 is an idea, a concept. So you basically got the outline of a solution. And the idea is this is, if you had a level 1 assessment for an idea, that helps you get investment dollars. Level
Like a
two,
business plan. Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And all we're saying is what you plan to do, not what you have done, not what you've documented, but you've got some form of documentation. You've got the outline of a product or a solution. The level 2 is like, now I've got fully documented. I've got requirements, I've got technical specs, I've got a solution that I may have proven by workflows or otherwise. So you've got a fully documented solution. The third level is the proof of concept. So we've actually built some code and it's working according to the design. And then level 4 is production. So you're live with a client and it's, revenue generating solution. And then level 5 is termed as optimizing, which is really that you're being deployed in multiple scenarios and you're refining the product to be, ever more capable. Right now, the GBA is only doing level 1 assessments because we're partly, the process was created, sort of finalized at the beginning of this year. And as a group, we were deciding well, actually, we started an assessment, I should say, in 2022. And again, it was, now we've defined this process. I should add the 5 levels, but then there was 11 elements, right? So the 2 years was deciding what the 11 elements should be, and then deciding what was the requirement of each of those elements for each of the 5 levels. So when you do the math, it's 55 sentences that have to be discussed, debated, refined multiple times. And then every time you did a subtle change to one element, it's not like there was a clean break. There was, it was, there was some overlap.
It definitely
So
reminds me of Common Core, again, my teacher mind, because whatever you are, whatever the foundation is in kindergarten, in first grade, then you're going to be adding something to it. In second grade, you're adding something to it. So if you were to start in fifth grade and work and say, no, you missed something, then you have to go all the way back down all the grades because
sure,
it has to start at the beginning level.
yeah.
So it's an integrated web.
Yeah. The other challenge, and we were, and this is where I think I came away with the greatest appreciation. Obviously, I'm a private permission blockchain, and get thee gone public blockchain. Like it was like but what we were trying to do, and again to be objective and to maintain the integrity, was to say, oh, does this apply? This element, how does this apply to Ethereum, to Bitcoin? To Solana, to Cardano, to IOTA, to header hash graph, to name your blockchain solution of choice. And so we were constantly pulling back and then looking at the different use cases. And that's where I began to, the thing for me was to sort of say, yeah, there's different horses for courses here in this blockchain world. So while we've got a sort of more of a flexible sort of limit, broader applicable platform, which potentially is high performance, do you need that to run an election, right? Because an election is kind of has a beginning, a process, and an end, and you tie it up with a bow. So it doesn't need to be large scale. It's not really high volume. It's actually, and the interesting thing which came out was, think about it. There's a need to share information for like KYC and understanding who the person is in banking, although there's also a level of confidentiality that you don't share it. You might share it with your counterparty, but you don't share it with the rest of the market. In voting, there's a need to associate the voter with the vote without associating the vote with the voter. So it's like there's levels of complexity and other things so we were constantly having to sort of say, does this still work as this definition? And I can give an example. Obviously, people tend to use two different words, smart contracts and consensus. But when we came to it, we had to be careful because not every solution needs smart contracts. We don't. But we have a deterministic scripting process, but not necessarily a smart contract. And I had to sort of say, look, it's an algorithm, so it can be, when we got to that point of defining how you may interact, it could be a direct API, a smart contract. We had to give the optionality thing. With consensus, which is often seen as the key thing, it really came down to like, well, is mining consensus? It's a way of getting everybody to agree what should be the blockchain in your copy that you reference. All right.
Right.
Voting is obviously purely consensus, right? But an independent validator, it's just a sort of special form of saying you're king or queen for the block, and you get to say what the truth is. So, um, so again, as much as people tend to blandly use the term consensus, what we then zeroed in on, and I would be standing there sort of saying, look, I'm not just self-serving here, but we don't need consensus. We synchronize off the transaction data line, and the key was synchronized. So we realized it was really if you think about it, synchronization is the
Yeah.
universal word that captures all those
Yeah.
mechanisms.
Exactly.
And so that was where again it was it was definitely a labor of love because it was all pro bono. So, but we somehow thought this is going to be useful to us. Now, to be honest with you, and just to be perfectly frank, we're all promoting. There's either solution providers like me trying to promote our solutions. There's consultants who want to learn how to do assessments and train and sell themselves, and the GBA even is now we've refined the training and I encourage people to do the Blockchain Foundations course. And then, as you mentioned, there's actually training now for the assessment, either so you can inform yourself as a solution buyer or a solution provider, or if you want to become an assessor, a trained assessor, you have to take that training and join the GBA and the Standards and Certifications group. And we have a weekly meeting where we're now deciding what are the next, we've got a pipeline of 16 and more coming. We've done 3 assessments, but and I was a bit reluctant. I was, happy to get the. We were only doing level 1 assessment, but I was like, I didn't want to be self-serving. I'm sort of kind of like, I've helped develop this. I shouldn't be at the front of the queue, or like I don't want to look like it's thing. And the other aspect of it is beyond the 11 elements of the BMM, we started to see like use cases, like I meant, the difference between capital markets and voting. So there was a working group. I helped develop a supplement for banking and finance use cases. The voting group used to create a supplement for voting. The healthcare created one for healthcare. There's an identity management supplement. I'm trying to think. Oh, there's a gaming supplement, I believe. So we then added these other supplements, and again, I was like, well, I kind of, helped draft it. I mean, so I'm a bit reluctant to sort of be assessed against, at least initially, but I was lucky enough that Gerard was picked. Dino Delaccio, who's the CTO of the UN Pension Fund, who's implemented an identity solution with blockchain in the UN for his pension fund. He became my lead assessor, and so then I'm now on the other side of the fence, having been the documenter of this process. I'm now the victim that's being held account, and particularly on the 23 requirements that there are in the banking and finance. And I was sort of like, so I was stuck there saying, what was I thinking, But it was, but really, and the reason I was persuaded was, Gerard was like, look, we need to train the assessors. We need to attest the assessment process. And we're doing this objectively with, independence. Gerard, although he's there to oversee and ensure it, he keeps himself, he doesn't want to look like he's unduly influencing anything. And we did one on a gaming system, an assessment on a voting solution, and then TapestryX as a banking and finance. So again, it helped cover the basis as far as different use cases and the supplements, and that's lined us up, again, to have trained assessors. So the goal is to, help the GBA and its members both, like I said, run assessments, solution buyers to find solution providers to find clients, and I said consultants to help train and advise their clients. So
And I think it's also going to help the industry in general. When I say the industry, it's the blockchain community, because there are many companies out there that make statements that they're doing certain things, and it is important to have the ability to take a look at where they are in their growth model and how they're serving the clients that they say that they're serving. And these are the type of standards that are reflective. So it's not as if when someone comes to be assessed, or to have the team look at everything, it's for promotion, it's for mentoring, it's for growth. So it's this, and again, I draw back on my teaching side. I'm nationally board certified, and in doing that, again, there was a lot of reflection, a lot of mentoring, and a lot of individuals who created standards for the national board certification. And so we're doing the same thing within the blockchain community, and that elevates the level of businesses that then can provide services and hopefully provide the solutions to the consumers that are out there. Because like you said, the internet started, 94, people were saying, what is the internet? And now they're saying, what's blockchain? And down the road, even though it's been around for a while, need to make sure that those companies that are incorporating and doing working within this community meet a quality level.
No, no, absolutely. And I think what I said at the beginning, we're talking to global banks, global software companies, global cloud providers, global technology companies. Like I said, in supply chain, it can be global or mid-sized, because they tend to have those sort of network effects. But there is this, if anything, there's a danger, and this is what part of, when I first joined the GBA, Gerard would be like, who is this guy? He's telling me why blockchains won't scale and they're not going to work. And then he realized it, and he came up with the term, I was a constructive critic, because what I was really saying was these things don't do everything they're supposed to, and they're going to give the technology a bad name, and we need to understand. At that time, I was sort of saying, hey, this is not as good, but I've got something better. But like I said, over the process with the BMM, I'm sort of saying, okay, you need to fit the solution to the use case and the requirements, and really that's the key thing. And I think what the BMM does is provide that framework, because now the industry's in a sort of teeter-totter moment. There's some people who are like tried their thing, hit the limitations, and have given up. Maersk wrote off $165 million with the Hyperledger project. The digital assets with the Australian Stock Exchange. That's another 150 plus million write-off. So there's some big losses here, and there's been some spectacular failures. And then there's been sort of like people stumbling through. And that's why there's this done with proof of concepts. I'm fed up with the spaghetti against the wall. I want to see something working. And that's where I think the BMM is going to help, because when we've talked to people, I think Deloitte brought out a fairly basic assessment standard, but it was just more about 4 elements and nothing too drastic in terms of it was a beginning sort of say that, like, what does a blockchain do and do you need it? Whereas the BMM is comprehensive, and we've now proven that both to ourselves and to the industry with the test cases, the use cases we've looked at. And I think that's where it's going to get interesting, because you've actually got a chance to say, I'm a solution buyer. I need to have you as a solution provider assessed, so I know what I'm up against, because these 11 elements and all these other supplemental requirements seem to, I recognize them. So if you can be assessed independently to be able to do that, then I'm happy to do it. And a key thing, again, the assessment isn't, like I said, bad to better or bad to best or worst to best. When it comes to us, one of the elements is performance. It's not about who's the fastest. It's not about who's the largest scale. It's about, does it fit the requirements of the use case?
Yeah.
So, that's, and again, in some cases, you don't need that. It's like all the different cars. You've got a sedan, you've got a Ferrari, supercar, you've got a SUV. Well, it's the car suits its purposes, or what you want to do. It's not one car can be used for every solution. And I'll often joke with, maybe I shouldn't say this, but some of the solutions, when they try and implement in the financial services, I said, you've got a Ferrari with a lawnmower engine. It looks cool, it's got a lot of potential, but it's going nowhere fast. So that's the reality. But those are but that's where I think the assessment says, where does your solution best fit? What's the best solution for you as a use case? And that's I think that's the power of the BMM.
I agree with you. And for everyone who's listening, I definitely recommend that you click the links below, which is the gbaglobal.org, so that way you can go ahead and explore both membership within GBA, as well as explore reaching out to learn more about the BMM, both from the, your corporate side, as well as from the assessment side, all the various areas to get involved in the working groups, because it's definitely, it's definitely been a journey, and it's definitely helps with all of us in our learning process here. Paul, I want to thank you for being on. I know that you've mentioned that there have been some other solutions that have gone through the process. I know that for those that are listening, the GBA Talk Show is going to be interviewing everyone who is going through the BMM process. So definitely, subscribe to the GBA YouTube, as well as the Anchor side of it. And if you have questions, reach out. That's why we're here. So Paul, any last minute thoughts before we sign off today?
No, thank you. This has been great. It's been a journey, and it's a fun one, and we're hoping, we're just trying to help the industry as much as we're helping ourselves. But I will just plug us. If you want to find out about TapestryX, it's tapestryx.com, which Jacqueline showed you earlier. The YouTube channel we have with different videos on different topics, educational as and commentary, as well as various where I've appeared in industry events, is it's called the Blockheads Thoughts Distributed. The Blockheads Thoughts Distributed on YouTube.
And that will be in
And
the
then
blog below too. Yeah.
Okay, and then the obviously, if you link to my profile on LinkedIn, I've got articles I've posted. I post the videos there as well, but the articles are in their own little section with if you're looking at activities, and that's got some useful background information for people if you want.
Definitely a great resource for everyone that would like to learn more about TapestryX and also the industry. So thank you so much for being on. Everyone, remember, I always say at the end of all my shows, whether it's Crypto Mom 2 or the GBA Talk Show, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We're all interconnected and we're all part of one world. So have a great day, guys. See you later. Bye.